Brian Reads Comics. I'm your host, Brian Hines, and today we're going to be doing some quickie reviews for the month of June 2023. Anyway, the first quickie review is going to be the Heralds of Apocalypse. Now, at the end of the X of Swords crossover, the twin mutant nations of Krakoa and Arakko made peace after many, one or two sword fights. Apocalypse, now known as A in a fancy mutant typeface, has reunited with his wife Genesis, also known as Annihilation, not to be confused with his son Genesis from the Age of Apocalypse, later known as Holocaust. Since then, the lovebirds have returned to Arakko, the living mutant island in another dimension. This one-shot picks up from there. Genesis doesn't like that A has gotten philosophical in his old age. She challenges him to a sword fight. If she wins, she leads her armies to war. In a flashback, we see that Apocalypse and Genesis are having their fourth child, whom they name Death. The children are famine, war, pestilence, and death. Named for things that they don't have in the paradise that is the mutant nation Okara, but Genesis gave them those names in preparation for a time when those concepts will return. They do eventually go to war when their home is invaded by the demons of the sentient helmet Annihilation. The Helm eventually makes a deal with Genesis, who never shared that deal with Apocalypse. The helmet would seal the portal the demons came through if Genesis asked, but this war remade her family into the warriors she wanted them to be, and it asks, if she does not close the portal, can Arakko win? Brokenhearted that she threw away this chance for peace, A charges her but is stabbed and defeated. He still wonders if the cost was worth it. Okara was split into Arakko and Krakoa, with Arakko and the demons being sealed in a separate dimension, while Apocalypse stayed on Krakoa to get the mutant race ready in case the demons ever reappeared. Since they reunited, Genesis, who merged with the Annihilation helmet now made into a staff, has reforged their family swords, sought out their enemies, and killed them. He pulls the swords out of his chest and yields, but on his terms, giving his wife one of 3 Krakoan portal seeds, keeping one for himself and planting the third in his spilled blood. They go their separate ways, but A knows that sooner or later he and Genesis will reunite, and he leaves to test himself and remain strong. Okay, this story really had no purpose other than to expand upon the backstory of Arakko that we touched upon in X of Swords. It seems that, like Genesis, we're getting the seeds of a story, but as it's the beginning of a journey, we don't really know where it's going to end. I can't say much for Al Ewing's story. There really isn't much plot, just a long history lesson that we've mostly learned before. The art by Luca Pizzazzi, Stefano Landini, and Rafael Pimento is surprisingly consistent. Fine character work, decent action, and Arakko is given a strange fantasy feel that seems right for a mutant homeland in another dimension. I just can't recommend this in good conscience. I'm a big enough Apocalypse fan both as a villain and his more recent mentor role in Excalibur, but this is just a rehashing of the history that we already got in X of Swords with a new revelation tacked onto a character that I don't feel anyone is particularly invested in. If you want to know what happened to Big Blue after the end of X of Swords, this is your answer, but I don't think anyone was impatiently tapping their foot asking, when are we going to get answers about Apocalypse's mutant family from another dimension? Read it if you want, but I don't think anyone's going to get too much out of this. Next up, it's Battle Chasers number 10. Joe Madureira's famous Image comic book is back! 22 years later, Joe is back to write the remainder of this tale, and we got new art by Ludo Lullaby. So what happened in issue 9? I've got no effing idea. It was over 20 years ago. There is a full-page recap getting you up to speed on the Battle Chasers and what they were up to. This includes Gully, the orphan daughter of a great warrior with her super-strength gauntlets. Garrison, a former paladin and ex-boyfriend of the thief Red Monica, famous for her gigantic personality. And Nolan, a wizard who was living in the forest with Calibretto, a war golem. Essentially, Monica busted a bad guy out of prison, leading to a mass escape and a riot that was put down by Gully and her friends, now known as the Battle Chasers. But when the king orders Garrison to bring Monica in, he refuses and is branded a traitor. Issue 10 opens with Monica recuperating at Garrison's house and being shooed away from his late wife's clothing. Meanwhile, Garrison's former mentor is hunting Monica with a trio of shape-shifting monsters called wolves, the largest of which loses patience and charges into the house, setting off a booby trap that burns it down along with the wolf inside. It survives, and another of the wolves taps into the eyes of the forest animals to find Monica and Garrison as they flee. Monica, who's trying to warn the king that his greatest rival is the one who hired her for the prison break, is left behind by Garrison, who goes to confront the hunters and buy her time. Meanwhile, Gully confronts the man who tried to steal her magic gloves and claims that he's her brother. But she doubts it since the gloves blow up his hands. He points out that the king now has her gloves, a weapon that only she can use, and thus she can't use them against the king if she were so inclined. Gully, followed by Calibretto, storms the castle and demands her gloves back from the guards protecting it. When she loses her temper, this triggers Calibretto, who seemingly loses control and, ignoring Gully, aims a flamethrower at the guards. The art is pretty good. Lullaby has a style very reminiscent of Madureira's. That said, he's not Joe. But again, how many people know how good Joe was? Since Battle Chasers ended, he's only done 2 series, the third Ultimates, and a short-lived Inhumans book, both for Marvel. The story is basically split into 2 chapters, with the majority being taken up by the action pursuit of Monica and Garrison, and then the shorter later plot developments by Gully. There's no sign of Nolan, and I don't really remember where we left him because, again, it's been 20 years. I'm not sure a direct continuation of this story is what I would have gone for here. Maybe a brand new story with flashbacks to fill in the gaps of what we missed between series. Frankly, a book launching at issue number 10 is going to rely entirely on nostalgia, and I'm not sure how well this book will do, as Mads isn't a huge name in comics as he was 20 years ago, and this issue seems to rely heavily on the nostalgia from that time. I'm really doubting it's going to attract new readers. Anyone who read Battle Chasers back in the day is at least in their 30s by now. It just seems that there were better ways to bring back this book after so long. I can't recommend you read this book unless you've recently read or reread the first 9 issues that came before. And finally, we have The Savage Strength of Starstorm #1 from Image Comics, written and drawn by Drew Craig, with colors and lettering by Jason Feinstone. An alien fleet led by Master Draxus and carrying the Royal Princess are searching for a lost weapon. Energy scans have led them to Earth. Meanwhile, amnesiac Grant Garrison has enrolled in high school and is paired with Eli Sanchez to get shown around, catching the eye of Eli's stepsister, Jen. Then a comet appears to be hurtling towards their school. It seems like everyone disappears except for Jen, Griff, and a blue-horned monster. Griff's hand falls on a crystal star. He's then transformed into wearing a sort of cosmic armor. For a moment he gets his memories back, and then he's flying and attacking the alien beast. He beats it down, and passed out it turns back into their principal. Jen promises to cover for him as the police arrived. But as the first issue closes, Ren Xanth is in his ship X9. He is also tracking the lost weapon, and he is arriving at Earth. So Drew Craig is the brother of Wes Craig, the artist on Deadly Class. And Drew himself is an okay artist, and he's an okay writer. Overall, this book is okay. The art is somewhat blocky and inflexible, falling somewhere between Eric Larson of the Savage Dragon fame and Jack Kirby of I Drew Every Single Comic Book Character You Ever Heard of fame. The story feels very basic and relies on a lot of tropes. Everyone wants this weapon. Young boy has the weapon, or possibly is the weapon. Falls for popular girls and gets messed with by jocks because of it. Oh, and if you had amnesia, you just got comic book bingo. Nothing I read or saw makes me want to read issue number 2. Oh, loyal viewers, I'm sorry. I know this came out a little late in the month, and frankly, we had 3 comics that aren't worth your time. What can I say? I just reviews them, I don't write them. Well, I write the reviews, I just don't write the comics that I'm reviewing. You get it. Anyway, my friends, thank you for joining me. I'll see you back here for the month of July. Until then, please like this video, subscribe to my channel, click the bell for notifications, and check out my Patreon page. Until next time, this is Brian Reads Comics, and I'm your host, Brian Hines.